Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? We're going old school today. You guys know I like to go old school sometimes. And today we're going to take a look at one of the greatest Marvel stories ever told, I think. Or at the very least, the definitive Daredevil story. As we're going to start up on Daredevil Born Again in Daredevil number 227 by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli. This is just one of those stories, like certain characters, there's a story that tends to, define them a little bit and that the publishers keep coming back to. So, like with Amazing Spider-Man, it seems like it's Kraven's Last Hunt. That's kind of one of the best Spider-Man stories that there's ever been. And, they're going to keep referencing it over and over down the line. Iron Man, Demon in a Bottle, Thor, turning into a frog. All those ones. And same with Daredevil and Born Again. Kind of the only Daredevil story you really need. Like if you were going to read one, this is kind of it. This is all about the destruction and rebirth of Matt Murdock. So let's get right into it. We can start with the cover. That's a pretty great one. I mean, we got David Mazzucchelli on this. David Mazzucchelli's just on another level from most comic artists. David Mazzucchelli is a guy who didn't stick around very long in mainstream comics. He did get a start at Marvel on Daredevil with number 209, so just a little while before this, and kind of became the regular penciler on that. In a run of issues that, honestly, I haven't heard very much about, but I mean, they look gorgeous. He's got this, I wouldn't say minimalist style, more like streamlined, where he doesn't use much in the way of hatching. It's more about just, shapes and light and shadow, and excellent use of composition. So the cover on this one naturally would then be a very nice composition. It's maybe not the most memorable one in this particular storyline, but it's certainly a nice ominous start to things, as we get Daredevil in the crosshairs set against New York City with the Kingpin overlooking everything. It's interesting. This is another case of, I can't quite imagine seeing this on the rack, next to Avengers or ROM. It doesn't necessarily look like the hard-boiled crime story that it's going to turn out to be, but it does have a different, more serious feeling than than most comic books on the rack would have had at the time. Interesting background here. I don't know how much of this is drawn. I think most of it, actually, the cityscape here. The only thing that makes me question that is the top of the Empire State Building here, which, looks like a photo, just like an overexposed photo. And pretty much everything else, it looks like it's probably been drawn out. But great kind of minimalist use of color on this one. It's pretty much all primary. You got your washed out blues, you got your bright yellows, and you got the red of Daredevil in the front here. All right, so we're going to start things off. We're not even sure where. This is with Karen Page, the ex-secretary of Matt Murdock and Foggy Nelson. Karen Page has had a rough last couple of years. She made her way to Hollywood to become a movie star, did get into some movies, then got into much worse movies. And along the way, she picked up a junk habit, and we're seeing her here at her lowest point, at a point where I imagine most readers couldn't really imagine seeing her at, where the only thing she's thinking about is scoring another fix, and she's willing to give up anything to do it. And in this case, she has something that's extremely valuable that she's never given up before, but she's at that point where she doesn't have anything else to give. And she's feeling pretty desperate. So she tells her guy here, who, looks like he's probably a dealer or knows somebody who's a dealer, something like that. And she tells him that she's got a paper with two names on them. One of them is Daredevil, and Daredevil has another name. And that's written down on the paper too. And she's willing to sell this for one fix. So crazy way to kick things off. David Mazzucchelli is doing both pencils and inks on this. So this is mostly him here. The colorist is helping out by keeping everything kind of washed out. But obviously all the pen and ink, but also all this tone would also be David Mazzucchelli. Although in this case, I think a fair bit of it is actually spatter that he's probably laid some masking over. Very interesting effect, like getting it through the Venetian blinds here. Wouldn't have thought of that. And Karen herself just looking haggard. And you can tell right on page one. This isn't going to be your typical superhero story. All right, so from there, we're going to cut to an office building somewhere, very modern looking office building. And I believe this would probably be owned by a subsidiary of Fisk Enterprises. And the guy that Karen was talking to, and he's going to pass along this name that Karen Page gave to him. And the guy he passes it to, he's a little hesitant to even bring it up with the Kingpin. Because, if you give Kingpin the name that's supposed to belong to Daredevil and it turns out it doesn't belong to Daredevil, your life isn't worth shit. The name that's supposed to belong to Daredevil and it turns out it doesn't belong to Daredevil, your life isn't worth shit. So from there, we're going to cut to a cruise out in the middle of the ocean with some wild color going on. Like David Mazzucchelli did some interesting stuff where he set it all as silhouette to start here. And, went pretty heavy on the cloud cover with the ink. So it's up to the colorist to really kind of make that pop. And man, did they ever do that. So we get our first shot of Wilson Fisk of the comic. Got to get a description of who he is, what he does, and what he does is pretty nasty. He's the boss of all crime in New York. And so he's taking a meeting with other crime bosses. After the meeting's over, this guy comes up to him and says, I've got this envelope that my guy gave me. I wouldn't even bring it up, but you said to keep the lines open. And, the girl that he got this off of says that she was Daredevil's ex. And if that's true, then potentially this could be Daredevil's secret identity. So Kingpin's going to take the name and he's going to usher the guy away. He gets his consigliere here, tells him to track that guy, tells him to track everybody who's touched this envelope up until now, get people in place and get them to await the kill order. Because once Kingpin decides to act on this, then he wants there to be absolutely no trail. And Kingpin isn't going to outwardly attack Matt Murdock based off of this information. He's just going to test it. He's going to ruin Matt Murdock's life and see if that provokes a reaction with Daredevil. Oh yeah, the wildest looking stuff. And so naturally from there, we have to cut to Daredevil himself, lying in bed. This is a composition we're going to see from issue to issue over the next couple. Only they get less and less comfortable as we go. So this is Apocalypse by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli. So Frank Miller doing the writing, David Mazzucchelli doing pencils and inks and tones. Christy Shield doing the colors. I think she deserves a shout out probably. Joe Rosen doing the letters, Ralph Macchio doing the editing, and Jim Shooter as editor-in-chief. Which, again, is interesting. I mean, Jim Shooter obviously doesn't have a problem with more mature subject matter. You only have to look at some of the stuff that Valiant first released. In Harbinger, Exo Manowar, Solar Man of the Atom, all that stuff. It's just in the context of a superhero book like Daredevil, it's almost surprising that Jim Shooter would give the okay for a story this mature. But then again, Frank Miller has written some pretty serious storylines with Daredevil before. This 7 issues for this storyline is all that he's going to stick around for, so it stands to reason that they negotiated him back just for this story. So we're going to open with Matt in bed, nice big comfy bed. He's a successful lawyer. He's not, a rich lawyer by any means, but he certainly makes enough to get by. And we're going to get our Frank Miller hard-boiled breakdown on who Daredevil is and what his life is like. So we got to get a breakdown on how Daredevil got his powers. We got to get a breakdown on a little bit about his past, a little bit about what he does. Because, of course, this is during the Jim Shooter era, and Jim Shooter, one of his main tenets, was that every issue could potentially be a buyer's first issue. So if they can't jump into an issue and not know what's going on, you got to explain it to them every time, which is a little tough when you only have 22 pages every time. But, they also can't say it doesn't work. When I was a kid, I had an issue of Daredevil from smack in the middle of the Born Again run, number 230. And I didn't have any of the other ones. I think I probably scored that off some other kid. But I had a fair idea of what was going on because, they explain everything that had led up to that point. So anyway, Daredevil wakes up with a feeling of unease. It's snowing outside in New York. He doesn't have a job right now. I think the firm between him and Foggy eventually just went out of business. And he's kind of feeling sorry for himself. And we're going to get a shot, like a nice long shot of Matt in his apartment. This is the kind of panel Jim Shooter would have loved, where you completely set the stage, where you set the character, in the middle of his living room and just show kind of the state that he's in. And, Matt's got a fairly nice looking apartment here, which we're going to see more of. Yeah, no, that's a really nice looking place. Matt hears the mail slot open in the front door, so he figures, okay, so that's probably going to have a whole bunch of job offers because I'm such a good lawyer. Goes up and he's going to check all the letters. And of course, Matt Murdock checks the letters. They're not in Braille or anything, but he can read the imprint of the ink on the envelope. But there's no job offers this time. What he's going to find is 3 bills, something from the March of Dimes, a cassette tape that was left by his girlfriend, which he says is bad news because she lives in town. She could have just called. As well as a letter from the bank stating that they hadn't gotten his last 2 mortgage payments, which he kind of brushes off at first. It's like, oh, fuck's sake, the bank's always screwing something up. So he's going to put on some coffee. He's going to put on that tape that he got from his girlfriend. And he's going to call up his accountant. The tape from his girlfriend, it's pretty much what you'd expect for a superhero. I never see you. You're always ditching me. I've run out of patience. I'm going to be moving on. And, Matt's probably kind of used to this spiel by now. You get the impression Matt's a bit of a dog, where he's always got kind of a new girl lined up. And yeah, so while this is playing, he's just kind of, okay, well, that's how it is. He's on the phone with his accountant, and only his accountant won't talk to him. His accountant seems to be convinced that there's been some information that Matt's been hiding. And before Matt can even begin to explain himself, he just woke up, his accountant hangs up on him. And Matt's left kind of speechless until there's a knock on the door. We're going to get another shot of the inside of Matt's apartment here. Yeah, this is a really nice place that we're going to get the tour of, which is interesting considering we're not going to stay in this for the remainder of the story. This is the nice place that Matt is losing. So Matt goes to answer the door. It's not the girlfriend coming to, maybe say, oh, I made a mistake. This is a subpoena demanding his presence at a grand jury. And it's not as a witness, and it's not as a lawyer. Apparently, charges have been made against Matt by a long-term upstanding New York cop stating that he paid a witness to perjure himself in court. And it's the kind of thing that, he had no reason to lie, right? So everybody's going to believe it. And, everybody's very easy to believe the worst thing about lawyers, naturally. And apparently there's enough evidence to push this to a trial. We're going to get more backgrounds in this. David Mazzucchelli, man, there's a lot of work done in this. I'm not sure how many issues off David Mazzucchelli got in advance of this. I got to imagine it was a few. No, you know what? I'm wrong on that. Doesn't look like it. David Mazzucchelli didn't draw Daredevil number 224, but he drew everything else from number 221 up, at least. So I don't know when the hell David Mazzucchelli would have got the time to draw this goddamn thing. Because there is no skimping in this thing. Everything is drawn kind of perfectly, and there's a pretty high level of detail. Not only that, like stuff like this, this is Foggy, and he's going to Matt's his ex-girlfriend's place now. And it turns out that her place has been absolutely trashed. But, it's trashed in a way where, Foggy's very clear. He's standing out against the background. The girlfriend's very clear. She's standing out. And then everything is just kind of placed around them in a neat way, but that still emphasizes them. Like, he's still doing excellent compositions. So it turns out that Gloria, this is Matt's ex, has been robbed. And they didn't, just go for the valuables. They took everything. The stuff they didn't take, they smashed, including Gloria's photos. Gloria's kind of an amateur photographer. And it's tough at first to see what the point of that is. Maybe it's to just kind of ruin her life a little bit, to drive her further from Matt. If the Kingpin knows that Foggy checks in on her fairly often, then maybe he's trying to drive her towards Foggy. That is kind of what ends up happening. It just seems like the kind of thing that'd be kind of tough to engineer. All right, from there, we're going to cut to the last of our prominent characters. There's like 5 prominent characters in this particular storyline. We got Matt, we got Karen, we got the Kingpin. We got Foggy and Gloria as kind of a combined major character. And then we've got Ben Urich. And Ben is just finding out about the charges being levied against Matt. And naturally, he can't believe them because he's one of the few people that knows Matt is Daredevil. And he gets a call from Matt, and Matt is acting kind of paranoid. He can't give Ben any kind of details right now because he doesn't know who he can trust at the moment. And so, he's off the phone again almost as soon as he got on. And Ben's just kind of left, worrying about him. But, what are you going to do? The guy's a fucking superhero. Beautiful looking stuff on these exteriors here of the Daily Bugle. Setting this thing at the beginning, at least, in winter, lets Dave Mazzucchelli do some interesting stuff with compositions. So he's doing like no holding line stuff with all this snow. Which is interesting considering, we're like 5 years out from Frank Miller kind of popularizing a no holding line style. All right, so from there, we're going to cut back to Matt. Matt is kind of stumbling around in kind of a haze, really, because he's got these charges against him. He's got his girlfriend broken up with him, and he's got this thing with the bank where they insist that they never got the money. And they're at the point where they're threatening foreclosure. Matt gets back to his place. He pulls out his checkbook just to make sure and finds the stubs and confirms, yeah, no, he definitely wrote out that check. He definitely mailed it off. It's just somewhere along the line, either the bank didn't get it or the bank is acting like they didn't get it. And on top of that, in the meantime, Matt's assets have been frozen by the IRS because of whatever was going on with his accountant. So for some reason, just everything is falling apart for Matt Murdock right now, and he has absolutely no idea why. So with his home life ruined, with his work life ruined, with his love life ruined, all he's got right now is jumping around on rooftops, hoping he can find somebody to bring to justice. Another nice long shot of a room. Yeah, like they're just page after page of these. And I love this choice of making the shadow here of Matt behind the desk and the Venetian blinds as a color hold. That looks so good. And so much less clunky than if you did that as a pen and ink drawing. So Matt goes running along those rooftops, running along power lines, flipping in the breeze. We're getting more of that snow as, just a color hold. So I imagine David Mazzucchelli was talking to the colorist about that. Great looking poses, not even like a hint of stiffness or unsurety. Like you never see a David Mazzucchelli panel where it seems like he maybe doesn't know what he should be doing here. So from here we're cutting to Foggy's apartment. And Foggy is taking Gloria in because she can't stay in her apartment. So yeah, maybe that was the objective, just to get her out of the place. And Foggy's got a great place with a fireplace in the apartment and everything. It's all nice and cozy. And, Gloria can't really help herself. She's all, snuggly because Foggy's been helping her through this whole thing. She's emotionally kind of vulnerable from the breakup with Matt. Foggy's always been super stable and, he's always been a good friend. He's always been right there. He's a perfect rebound. So she makes a move, like saying, oh, man, I was so shook up by what happened in my apartment. My hands were shaking, but they're not now because I'm so comfortable. Here, check it. And, grabs his hand and, get that kind of awkward moment. And, Foggy's a good guy. He's going to back out at least the first time. So in this case, he's going to take the couch. I love this expression here from Gloria, like, so that's how it's going to be, huh? You're turning me down? All right. Oh, yeah, fantastic looking stuff. All right, from here we're cutting back to Daredevil. So what Daredevil has decided to do is he's going to go pay a visit to that 20-year veteran of the Force who had a spotless record, who decided to press charges against Matt. So this is Nick Margulis, I think. And Daredevil's just going to break right in. You're going to cut open a hole in the window here, unlatch it, and slip inside. We get a nice view of Nick's house here, his apartment. Not nearly as nice as Matt or Foggy's. 20 years on the Force doesn't pay you quite the same as, life as a lawyer. And Daredevil's just asking, so what's up, man? Like, why are you lying about Matt Murdock? Which isn't really something somebody like Daredevil should know, but I guess it's possible, he could have gotten that information. And, Nick immediately smashes the beer bottle that he'd grabbed and takes a lunge at Daredevil. And Daredevil quickly realizes that this is going nowhere. He can't really get the information that he wants without resorting to something like torture. So he's just going to toss Nick back onto his table, and by the time Nick gets up, Daredevil's gone. But Nick knows now that Daredevil knows about him, and in fact, he's been advised that this could happen. So what he's going to do is he's going to phone whatever contact he has and let them know Daredevil was here. Yep, he did pretty much what you said, and I did what you told me to. So when does my boy get that treatment that you were promising? So it's like, okay, so he's been blackmailed. Like, you kind of figured it was going to be something like that. Great, short little action bit. Like, it's not even an action scene. It's more of an action panel. But, these poses are pretty great. And outside the window, Daredevil hasn't gone very far at all. He's been listening into the conversations. So he knows now that Nick was blackmailed and that he's going to keep pressing at the hearing. So, he did get the information he was looking for. He doesn't know who did all this just yet. The Kingpin obviously could, but Daredevil's got a few enemies who could do this kind of thing to him. And as far as he knows, the Kingpin doesn't know who he is, so that wouldn't necessarily be his first thought. So Daredevil's going to bounce his way home. That's a fun panel there. And he's going to find that everything has been switched off. He has no electricity, he has no phone, he has no heat. So all he can really do is go and catch some sleep. Nice economical use of panels here. Just show a hand twisting a dial on the stove. Just show a hand holding a phone receiver. All works perfectly. All right, next morning in New York. Nice looking skyline. That's pretty garish for a sunrise. But it looks like Mazzucchelli went pretty quick on this with the ink, actually. With a brush, just kind of slashing at it. So, didn't really leave the colors a whole lot of room to maneuver. Foggy wakes up on his couch. So, stayed a good guy through the night. Again, at least this night. Wakes up and Gloria's in the kitchen making bacon, eggs, and pancakes. Doesn't say anything, just completely enamors herself to Foggy, right off the bat. Great little domestic scene here. And then he's going to get a phone call, right first thing in the morning. Turns out this is Matt. And Matt is kind of saying some weird shit. Blurts out to Foggy that he's at a phone booth and that he's got this grand jury thing going on. And we don't need to hear any more. We just get Foggy going, oh golly, oh golly. And Gloria looking a little bit concerned, maybe a little bit put out that her nice morning has been ruined by Matt. And now we're going to cut back to the Kingpin finally, who's kind of been just watching his handiwork, and he finds it to be good. He's got people watching Matt at all times, taking photos through telephoto lenses. By day, Matt's been, staying at the library, researching shit constantly, trying to figure a way out of this predicament that he's somehow gotten into. By night, it's even better as far as the Kingpin's concerned, because Daredevil is beating the living shit out of everybody in the area. Anybody who's any kind of stoolie, who's ever sold information, who, Daredevil has ever visited before to try and get some kind of enlightenment about some kind of criminal situation, he's been seeking them all out. He doesn't wait long before he starts getting violent, and the attacks have been getting more violent as he goes. And all this just confirms that the information the Kingpin got was good, and it all culminates in some waterfront saloon where Daredevil just busts in, doesn't have any kind of strategy, no sense of caution whatsoever, just demolishes everybody, screaming about Matt Murdock. Not even following leads, just, I know you're criminals, somebody knows what the fuck is going on with Matt Murdock, and you're gonna tell me. So yeah, that confirms it for the Kingpin, and what Kingpin's gonna do now is he's gonna send out that kill order. So anybody who has any knowledge about this, other than, the Kingpin himself and his consigliere, all of them have to die, including Karen Page. The only thing that's kind of messing this up for the Kingpin is that Matt Murdock doesn't get thrown in jail for the charges that have been levied against him. Foggy's able to talk it down to Matt just being disbarred. So he's not allowed to practice law anymore. Absolutely great panels, just like snapshot after snapshot. This is so good here. Mostly in shadow. This could be Daredevil. This could be a supervillain beating the shit out of some poor guy. You couldn't tell from the photo. The shot here of the busted up saloon, also awesome, low angle, get Daredevil looking menacing. Send him on the edge, that kind of thing. And of course, we got to draw every single bit of the background, and that just looks excellent. And interesting treatment on stuff like Foggy in court, where it kind of feels a little bit like one of those court drawings. And a lot of that is down to like a heavy use of tone for any kind of shading here. And of course, that's all David Mazzucchelli too. So yeah, Matt is no longer allowed to practice law. He faces poverty and public shame. He will be hounded by doctored tax files, deprived of his very home. Survival will become his only concern. That's the line that should maybe give Kingpin, pause for thought. But he keeps rolling because, man, this is a good day. Foggy's performance in the trial, prompts the Kingpin to think, maybe I should hire that guy. So that's an interesting twist. And the only thing left is to decide what to do with Matt Murdock, whether he should finish him off now, or if he should just kind of let him twist in the wind. And he's going to let him twist for a while. And after the trial, Foggy, walks up to Matt. He's like, man, I'm sorry I couldn't get it done any lower. And Matt's like, you know what? It's fine. Given what the case was, you did every fucking thing you could. And they're going to give a handshake and a hug. And that's the last Foggy is going to see of Matt for some time. All right, cutting back to Karen Page in Mexico. Karen got her fix. And, now she's been through it. And she needs another one. So she has to go back to that guy that, she gave Matt's name to that kicked all of this off. And she stumbles in right at the moment where that guy is getting assassinated by one of the Kingpin's henchmen. Guy looks up, sees Karen, that's his next target, but he wasn't ready. So he, fires a quick shot, which misses, and Karen goes running. And the first thing she thinks is that she has to find Matt, even though, not too long ago, she started Matt on a path that completely ruined his life. Of course, she doesn't know that, but... And we're going to end things with Matt, who's had a lousy couple of days. He's just received the notice of foreclosure from the bank. He has 30 days to vacate. He's got no access to his bank accounts. He's got $10 in his wallet. And Matt's starting to get a little bit squirrely. He, at first he thought this was all some single enemy, maybe some Kingpin who might have done all this. But now he's getting kind of paranoid, thinking, you know what? I think actually it's just that the whole world is against me. The IRS, the power company, the phone company, even Foggy, he called up Foggy at one point, and Gloria was there. So Foggy might be in on it too. And he has that thought for a moment. He's like, no. Foggy's cool. Foggy kept me out of jail. I'm just losing my goddamn mind. So all he can do now is go back home. He's got 30 days to figure something out, some kind of course of action to try and turn his path here. Only he doesn't quite get up to the home when the home blows up right in front of him. That is a hell of a page there. Big old explosion, big close-up on Matt with the blaze reflected in his glasses here. Big shattered panel kind of stuff here. And yeah, for just how exact David Mazzucchelli's style is throughout, the entirety of the book, getting to this point, and everything's just, kind of jagged and looking rushed, like looking almost like Bill Sienkiewicz kind of stuff in some ways. It kind of throws you off. And Matt's left just standing in the wreckage of what used to be his house. So now he has nothing. Goes sifting through it, nothing survived, except that he finds one thing, and that's his costume. Costume survives somehow, and that's what kind of tips him off. You know what? This is the reason all this happened. And we get the ending here. I never would have connected it to you. Nothing about it said gangster. Not until this. It was a nice piece of work, Kingpin. You shouldn't have signed it. So we get the feeling that Matt is going to deliver some justice in the next issue. He's going to try. It's not going to go well. But yeah, fantastic page to end on. That is some nice looking rubble. Rubble's tough to render in a way where it looks like what it is, which is a bunch of beams and dirt. That's not the easiest thing to draw in a way that makes it look like anything other than just a mess. And we get our nice, determined kind of close-up on Matt here to end things. Very dramatically lit. Excellent looking stuff. All right. Oh, Secret Wars 2 is going on too. That's totally similar. So yeah, that's Daredevil number 227. It's pretty great. On its own, we've probably seen kind of similar stuff, probably mostly in the Frank Miller era, actually, thinking about it, where Daredevil, gets knocked down really far. And then in the next one, Daredevil's going to come back. That's not how this is going to go. Daredevil is going to get dragged for half a year. Maybe the only thing that kind of bugs me about this is that I wish it was longer. I want to see more conversations with the accountant or with the IRS. I want more in-depth accounts of Daredevil beating the shit out of stoolies. I want to see the assassins traveling down to Mexico to deal with the dealer that was dealing with Karen. I want the entire Elmore Leonard novel, basically. We did get a whole ton of events in just 22 pages, which is kind of mind-boggling. And the only thing is that, it is going to make things feel a little bit rushed going forward because, we've only got a total of, 154 pages to get through weeks or maybe a couple of months of Matt's life, where every little thing is going to disintegrate around him. It's not really a complaint. I just wish there was more. Which is probably the sign that it's exactly as long as it should be. So we are going to keep up with this. I'm going to feature every issue of this for the next little while. And we're going to just bask in the glory. But for this one, that's going to do it. Thanks very much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like. Helps with the algorithm stuff. If you want to see more, hit subscribe. And if you really want to help out, in the description, there's a link to my Patreon. If you go subscribe there, that'll give you access to everything I do. So all sorts of comic book art, all sorts of videos. Also in the description, there's a link to the merch store, where you can get your Blood Force caps and t-shirts and coffee mugs. And, not prophylactics, not just yet. You get posters, though. Get a Blood Force poster. Maybe that'll act as a prophylactic. You can also follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions. Commissions are open. So yeah, that's going to do it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.